All right, part dose of the horrible, awful, terrible Tesla experience. I promise, just give me another day. I will say nice things about Tesla again, but it is not today, because immediately after the whole pothole predicament, roadside assistance had to be called. They towed the vehicle to the closest service center, and it was Saturday night, so nobody was there. I couldn't get it fixed that night, but I was quite a bit nervous because we were supposed to come home the following Monday. So I figured, yeah, the service center should be able to patch things up on Sunday, right? I looked up the Tesla Center hours and it said that it opened at 10 a.m. and closed at 4, but I called and couldn't get anybody on the phone. I was sending messages through the service app, couldn't get a response from anyone. So I straight up just had my parents drop me off at the service center, and I walk in the front door. There's a salesperson there, very friendly, actually viewer of the channel, and I say, hey, it's an emergency, like we need this car fixed today so that we can drive back tomorrow. It's a long, 14-hour road trip, so I really didn't want to wait until the next day because we had appointments scheduled, people waiting on us, family waiting on us. This was also the first time my dad was actually going to be joining me on an EV road trip back home. So a lot of pressure on Tesla here, and the guy at the Tesla Center tells me, no, they only have salespeople in the store on Sundays. They don't have service technicians on Sunday at all, which to me feels a little bit backwards, especially if you imagined I was just on a road trip, if I had hit a pothole on the freeway and just had to pull into some random shop. That would have happened on a Saturday, and they would have been like, oh, we can sell you a car on Sunday. We'll happily tell you how the website works and say, here, click the order now button. But if your car is stranded somewhere, no, we can't help you today. You have to wait until tomorrow. I guess you gotta book a hotel or something like that. So I was a little bit flustered that they have salespeople 7 days a week, but not service technicians. That feels wrong to me. But finally, okay, it's Monday morning. I call at 8 a.m., can't get anybody on the phone. I'm texting them, still not getting any responses, even though they told me the day before that service technicians show up at 8 a.m. So I just straight up drive down there, explain the whole situation, say, look, I'm from out of state, this is an emergency, I really need to get home today. When you're driving a 14-hour road trip, you prefer leaving at 4 or 5 a.m. So we already feel very behind showing up at 8:30 to the service center, explaining the whole situation, and they tell me there's nothing they can do, there's no way to move me up in the queue. Other people had scheduled service appointments that are fixing, quality control problems with their vehicles, and I was like, look, everybody else here has Washington plates, okay? They're local, you can give them a loaner vehicle and they can go about their day. I can't benefit from a loaner vehicle. I need to do a huge road trip today. I'm already way behind schedule. Even if I leave right this second, I'm not getting home until midnight. And the first guy I checked in with said, there's nothing you can do, you just have to wait your turn. So I patiently wait in the lobby, and then another technician walks by and I say, hey, can I get at least an ETA? Is the car gonna get fixed today, or is it gonna be next week? Because we're gonna have to make some serious calls to both of our employers, me and my wife's jobs, if we're gonna be this delayed. And he said, you know what, I'll check with the technicians right now. And he goes back there, and immediately after I asked how long it's going to take, they started working on the car. So I don't know if I was able to jump the line or jump the queue simply because I hung out at the center and was asking, but at least the impression I got, and this was similar to my last service experience, if you hang around the service center, they will put you at the top of the line. If you just head out or leave or take a loaner vehicle, they don't see you as necessarily a top priority. They're like, oh, well, you're fine. You're probably just going about your daily life using the loaner vehicle. You'll be all right. So they took way longer than I initially thought, and they said, we have some Pirelli tires available. Do you want to switch to the Pirellis? And of course, because my tire was severely damaged and I just had brand new Michelins put on the rear, I just said, yeah, let's put on 2 Pirelli tires to the front and call it a day. There was rim damage on the front rim as well, so they replaced that. But it wasn't until 10:30, 10:45 that they actually brought the car out and said, okay, here it is, it's ready. Tesla insurance, by the way, was no help at all. They didn't care that there was pothole damage, and I'm still arguing with them online about tire and rim damage being covered because they literally just covered it a month ago with my last incident, and now they're saying they don't help with that. Huge communication frustration. I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But I drive quickly back to my parents' place so that we can load up and begin this big road trip at around 11 a.m., meaning we're not getting home until 2 a.m. And as soon as I get home, I'm rushing really fast. I'm making sure the car is safe. I'm accelerating a little bit just to make sure everything feels solid. There's no low tire pressure warnings or anything like that. The car feels smooth. The car feels good. We get to the house and my wife immediately comments, they put winter tires on the front. And I was just like, oh, my heart sank. I went, seriously? After all this, after my family packed up everything so that we could be ready for the road trip, and we told people, okay, we should be there by Tuesday, but now we've got to drive long hours into the night. And I just found out that they sold me winter tires when it's over 100 degrees out in the middle of summer. At no point did the service center ask me, do you want winter tires? You know, I'm not saying I would have denied it if that was all they had in stock, but that's not how the question was phrased. They came to me and just said, we have some Pirelli tires, is that okay? And I said, yes, I don't care what brand they are, I just need some new tires. And they must have taken that as, well, he must not care if there's winter tires on the front versus all seasons on the back, which is not an ideal tire setup at all. So while I was very frustrated, I felt like there was really nothing we could do because, again, we have jobs, we had people waiting on us, we had appointments booked, and people waiting for us back home. So basically, we were gonna lose money if we ended up delaying the road trip entirely. So we just decided to commence with the road trip, and we headed out at about 11 a.m. on this huge road trip, which we thought would only take 14 hours. And yeah, the summer heat made things actually quite a bit worse than we realized. Now again, I've owned my Tesla for 2 years. I've driven it through hot summer, but for some reason, I've never quite experienced range loss as bad as this. It may have been because I was traveling overseas last summer, so maybe I didn't road trip as much in the extreme heat. But for a lot of this drive in the middle of the day, it was around 109 degrees Fahrenheit. And I knew that in the extreme heat, you know, the HVAC works a bit harder. Maybe the fact that we had some new winter tires would affect our range a little bit, but I would have expected 20% range loss or maybe 30% range loss. But you know, when you're traveling at highway speeds and there's some elevation differences, I actually was much closer to experiencing 60% range loss. How do I calculate that? Well, my average lifetime efficiency for the Model 3 is 235 watt hours per mile, and we were cruising down on the interstate, going the speed limit, by the way, not speeding at all, just following the speed limit recommendations, and we were still clocking in well over 480 watt hours per mile, and at certain points surpassing 500 watt hours per mile on Tesla's like most efficient model, the rear-wheel drive lithium iron phosphate Model 3 from 2022. Okay, we got the heat pump, which doesn't really matter that much for summer, and we've got 18-inch aero wheels, we've got the aero caps on them, and our efficiency just tanked because we were driving in the middle of this heat wave, and it became a serious problem, especially for the route planning software, which I still very much today believe is very dated and quite dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Most of the time, you know, when the weather is pretty good, even in the cold, I've road tripped a lot when it's pretty low in temperature. If the car says you'll arrive at like 10%, usually I ended up getting there around 15%. And typically I could adjust my speed a little bit. Like if I followed the speed limit, the battery estimator would be super accurate for your state of charge when you arrive at your destination. But in this particular instance, it was way off. Because of the excess energy consumption due to the extreme heat, we had to stop at way more supercharging stations that we normally would never have to on this exact same route, which I've done 3 or 4 times already with this exact same car, also in the month of June, July, and August. So it's not an unfamiliar route to me at all, but we were supercharging at the Dalles supercharger in Washington. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it told us that we could make it all the way to Madras, Oregon, and get there with about 17%, which I thought was a decent amount of margin. You know, I've seen other guys with, you know, the out of spec challenges say like, let's try to arrive at 2%. So I thought we were being overly generous and prepared, and we start on the road trip. I don't exceed the speed limit at all, not even 1 mile per hour, and I keep the cruise control on, and slowly as the road trip continues, it starts saying that we're gonna arrive at Madras at like 4%, 3%, or 2%. Like at one part of the journey, it actually rerouted when we were halfway to Madras and said, turn back now, go back to the exact same supercharger you were at, because the car didn't think we were gonna make it. So even though the speed limit on a lot of this freeway was 65, I was going 55, 52 during huge stretches of it, just to make sure that we'd have enough juice to get us to the next supercharging stop. There was no other place we could stop on this route, by the way. That's why the route planner halfway through the journey was like, actually just turn around backwards. And I'm a fairly geeky, nerdy guy that's smart enough to realize like, I just gotta keep the speed down in order to get to my destination. And the crazy thing is that I plugged into one supercharger, it told me I had sufficient charge to get to the next one, and then I follow the speed limit or go under it, and the car automatically reroutes me to go back exactly where I just came from in supercharge again. Another robotaxi dilemma that I'm not sure if Tesla has considered yet. If the robotaxi has this exact same kind of trip planning estimation and it doesn't take into consideration the extreme heat of the environment, then it would have been in an endless loop. It would have thought it could make it to Madras and then halfway through bailed out and gone right back where it came from. That's not a good experience. So because we had to stop more and charge longer than we initially thought, and the range on my Model 3 basically was cut in half from like 250 to now 125, the road trip actually ended up being more like 15 and a half hours. And because the service center wasn't open on a Sunday, again, sales team was, we had to leave on that Monday at 11 a.m. So we really didn't get home until like 3 a.m. and there's a lot of late night interstate driving where it's super dark and we could barely see. Honestly, I was super laser focused and stayed awake through the entire time. I never got sleepy or drowsy or anything like that, but it felt dangerous to be driving that late at night where visibility is not that great because you're driving through huge stretches of I-5 where there's not street lights. So it's just like lots of darkness, no other cars on the freeway for hours at a time. So once, of course, the sun went down and the weather cooled off a bit, the efficiency came back to the Model 3. So I don't think the winter tires really had that big of an effect. Once the weather was more at like 85, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I was able to easily get my average lifetime efficiency again of about 235 watt hours a mile. But still, I think the route planning absolutely needs to get more accurate when it comes to these extreme temperatures because the world's only getting warmer, the heat is only rising, and especially during the summer, there's a lot of road trips and a lot of family vacations going on, and the route planning definitely should not tell me that I'm gonna arrive at my destination at 17% only for me to get halfway there following the speed limit and then have it tell me to turn back around and go right back where I started and just charge, I don't know, even higher again. It would be an endless loop, and that barely got us to Madras. So I kept the speed really low and we ended up arriving, you know, around like 10 or 9%. So we had some more buffer to work with, but boy, that route planning definitely was not helping and it was not very accurate at all. And I think it mainly had to do with the temperature at that time. So this is a software problem that I think Tesla can fix, but absolutely I think put a sour taste in my dad's mouth because this was his first electric vehicle road trip he'd ever experienced. He probably doesn't ever want to do one again after all of the range anxiety and charger anxiety and seeing how much the heat affected the range. I thought lithium iron phosphate was a little bit more temperature chillaxed than other battery chemistries out there, but sounds like all of the downsides of the nickel-based cells apply to the standard range battery pack as well. So even though it's the most aerodynamic Tesla they make and the most energy efficient one they make, it's crazy to see its efficiency, even at speed limit, exceed 500 watt hours per mile. And the HVAC was not even working that hard. We had the interior set to like 72 degrees. It wasn't that crazy. So I really hope in the future Tesla could consider doubling down on their service centers. Those, in my opinion, at least for roadside assistance, should be open 7 days a week. If you're gonna pay salespeople to be there 7 days a week, you should definitely pay service technicians. They're already falling behind from what I can tell. And also, please, Tesla, fix the software to account for temperatures, especially in extreme heat situations that can estimate that the vehicle energy consumption is gonna be way, way higher than average, which in this case, the car just didn't seem to understand. I hope you guys have had better summer road trip experiences than I have. Feel free to share your stories down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.